When we try to understand the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, it's so easy to get lost in the headlines, the maps, the endless debates over who's right and who's wrong. But to really, truly get why this conflict feels so unbreakable, we have to go deeper. We have to look at the powerful, ancient, and clashing stories that each side tells about itself.
So, here's how we're going to break this down. First, we'll quickly touch on a century of conflict. Then we'll get into the absolute core of this, the huge difference between history and memory. From there, we'll dive into the Jewish narrative and then the Palestinian narrative. And finally, we'll ask the big question. Is it even possible for these stories to change? Okay, let's get into it.
The conflict between Israelis and Palestinians. It's one of the longest-running and most painful disputes in the entire world. It really does feel like this giant unsolvable puzzle of land and who belongs and who's safe, and it has just defied every attempt at a solution for generations.
So you have to ask yourself, right? Why? After all this time, all the wars, all the peace talks, why does it feel more impossible now than ever? It's not just about borders, it's not just about water rights, it's something much, much deeper. And the answer? Well, the answer is in the stories. Okay, so here are the big historical moments you always hear about. It really kicks off in the late 1800s with the Zionist movement, which encouraged Jewish people to move to the region. Then, boom, 1948, the State of Israel is created, and the First Arab-Israeli War breaks out immediately. Fast forward to 1967, you have the Six-Day War, and Israel occupies the West Bank and Gaza. From there, you see these massive Palestinian uprisings, the intifadas, and then glimmers of hope, like the Oslo Accords in the 90s. But here's the thing. These dates, these facts, they're just the skeleton. They don't have the flesh and blood. They don't explain the passion, the trauma, the sheer persistence of this fight. To really understand what's driving everything, you have to get this one crucial idea, the difference between history and memory. They might sound like the same thing, but believe me, they are worlds apart. Think of it like this. History is the official report. It's the collection of facts and dates. It's what happened to them. It's distant. But memory, memory, is what happened to us. It's personal. It's the story we tell ourselves around the dinner table, the one that's passed down from our grandparents. It's what gives all those historical events their meaning, and it's what tells a people who they are. And this quote from the Israeli philosopher Mika Goodman it nails it. Memory is what happened to us. History is what happened to them. So simple, but so powerful. You can argue about history in a classroom, but memory is felt in your gut. And in the Middle East, you have two of the most powerful memories on Earth locked in this devastating struggle. So let's see how this actually works. We'll start with the foundational story of the Jewish people. And you have to understand, this is not a story that started 75 years ago. This is a memory that goes back thousands of years. The Jewish collective memory is just filled with these epic Bible stories of slavery and freedom and heroism. It's also shaped by 2,000 years of being the outsider, of persecution, of exile, all culminating in the absolute unimaginable horror of the Holocaust. And yes, this memory also has some really dark, difficult parts, like the biblical command to destroy an ancient enemy, Amalek, which some have used to justify violence today. So for many, Zionism wasn't just a political idea. It was seen as a desperate return home, a way to finally be safe. The land itself isn't just dirt and rock. It's the stage where their most sacred stories took place. And all of that deep, ancient memory of surviving against all odds, you can see it directly fueling the modern Israeli identity. It creates this culture of chutzpah, of incredible resilience, and this feeling that, challenges aren't really obstacles. They're just the next thing you have to overcome to survive. Now, living on that exact same land, but inside a completely different emotional world, is a Palestinian narrative. And it is an equally powerful story of deep, deep roots and profound recent loss. For Palestinians, their story is also tied to the ancient history of the land. They see themselves as descendants of peoples like the Canaanites. But the single defining event of their modern memory is 1948. They call it the Nakba, which in Arabic means the catastrophe. This was the moment hundreds of thousands of Palestinians were displaced from their homes during the war. So their whole central story becomes one of dispossession, of loss, of being driven from their land. And the fight against that loss is sometimes framed using Islamic stories of jihad or struggle, which gives it this mythic, righteous weight. And if you want a perfect symbol of this memory, look no further than the house key.
I mean, so many Palestinian families who fled in 1948 still have the keys to the homes they left behind, homes that might not even exist anymore. These aren't just pieces of metal. They've become these sacred objects, a physical link to a lost world, and a tangible symbol of the hope of one day returning. It's memory made solid. So do you see what's happening? This is why it's so volatile. When these two peoples look at each other, they don't just see a neighbor or a political rival. They see the villain from their own deepest, most existential story. The conflict stops being a normal dispute over land and becomes this epic, mythic war where both sides feel like they are fighting for their very survival against an ancient enemy.
Wow. Okay, I know, this sounds incredibly bleak. It sounds hopeless. If both sides are trapped inside these massive, all-consuming stories, is there any way out? Well, that brings us to our last and maybe most important question: can the story change? The answer might be in realizing that no culture has just one story. Think about it. The Jewish, Palestinian, and Islamic traditions, they aren't just single books. They are vast libraries filled with thousands of different stories. Yeah, they have stories of war and revenge, but they also have stories of compassion and forgiveness and peace. The real power is in which stories we choose to pull off the shelf and tell. And what's so fascinating is that both traditions have these alternate paths built right in. Take the Jewish story of the brothers Jacob and Esau, a story of deep betrayal and enmity. When they finally meet after 20 years, the text is famously ambiguous about what happens next. Ancient rabbis debated for centuries. Did Esau attack his brother, or did he kiss him? A powerful interpretation argues he was overcome with compassion and chose to embrace him. And after that, they went their separate ways, to their own lands, in peace. It's a story not of eternal conflict, but of reconciliation.
But we can never forget that this isn't just an intellectual exercise. These stories have a devastating, real-world cost. An essayist I read talked about his friend whose sons were fighting. Every time he saw she posted something online, he would be terrified it was bad news, and he would find himself praying the same prayer over and over. Dear God, more stories. It's a plea that this conflict won't create yet another tragedy to be added to the memory, yet another story of loss.
Because in the end, that's the crucial takeaway. These narratives aren't just passive things. They actively build the world around us. The stories we choose to tell ourselves, whether they're about eternal hatred or the possibility of reconciliation, they have real life-or-death consequences. They can lead to war, or they can build a fragile bridge toward peace.
And so, that's where we have to end. Understanding this conflict isn't just about knowing history. It's about recognizing the incredible power of memory. It challenges all of us to look past the noise, to really listen to the stories people tell about themselves, and then to ask a really hard question. In a world that is full of so many different stories, what stories will we choose to hear?